Alright guys, welcome back to Formula 1 news. Going into 2023, the FIA are clamping down on two innovations we saw across this past season. One from Mercedes' front wing and one from the rear wing of the Aston Martin. Both illegal going into the upcoming season. Who is this potentially going to affect in a negative way? Hit the like button if you enjoy. Subscribe if you're new as always, I'd greatly appreciate it. Let's dive into things. Mercedes obviously looking for a big bounce back after last season, dreadful season of course, by their standards. And that will largely come down to the car. They've got the strategy, kind of, not as good as Red Bull, but better than Ferrari. They've got the drivers. They need the car for the upcoming season if they want to actually compete for the title yet again. Part of that is going to come down to innovation, solving their problems, but they did have some good ideas this season. One of them was on the front wing of the car that has now been made illegal by the FIA. We saw them experiment with this a few times over the season, but it was actually one that they introduced right at the start of the year that has now been removed. Now, it probably can't have made an absolutely immense difference, just because this was legal for a long enough time for other teams to copy this if they wanted to. But this is what we're looking at here. So we're not looking at this. So this was what we saw in Austin. I think we saw as maybe first in Mexico, where they had these like slats on the front here. And according to the rules, they weren't allowed to have them that big. And therefore, when we actually saw the front wing get put on the car in Austin, I think they tried this in Mexico and this actually came on the car a couple of races later. Then they basically removed those. And it was a new front wing design, but it wasn't so radical as what we saw in this particular image. What has actually been banned though is this, because that one we just saw was clamped down on by the FIA at the time. It kind of surprised to me in a way that some of these things kind of will have happened the entire season long. For example, the Aston Martin wing I think was brought in back in Hungary, and since then nothing's been done about it, and now at the end of the season they're like, yeah, that's not allowed anymore, guys, which maybe is fair enough. They had to go to the regulatory processes. They can't just look at it and say, yeah, we don't like that, it's going to get banned. They have to go through the rules and make sure they can do it, and they're making a couple of tweaks to the wording of the regulations to make this no longer possible. Now, as I say, it probably can't have made a massive difference just because no other teams copied this, but this was the Mercedes front wing that we first saw in Miami, and you guys can see that basically the sides of the slats here are not even connected to the end plate. We don't really see this on other cars. Very aggressive downwash and outwash from the airflow here, so you know, Mercedes trying to generate more downforce from the front wing, which was where they're actually quite strong in this year's car compared to the weaknesses of straight line speed and the like. The key thing is though with these new regulations is that the real intention was in 2022 with the new regs was to reduce the outwash, downwash and basically just airflow turbulence to the car behind, and anything that doesn't kind of align with that is on the borderline of being allowed or potentially banned, as clearly has been the case here, despite the fact that, as I say, can't have made much difference, otherwise teams would have copied this as it's been allowed all season. Red Bull didn't bother to copy it, right? This was their front wing pretty much all season long. You guys can see on the left hand side that these kind of slats of the wing are connected to the end plate and don't wash, you know, downwash so heavily or so aggressively as the ones on the Mercedes do, to such a degree they're not even connected towards the back here. So just some different design philosophies. Tough to say what's better, what's worse, but the Mercedes concept is now banned. Maybe they knew it was coming, but still they're going to have to come up with a new concept for their front wing, and it can't look like this any longer. The other side of this, of course, it would just to kind of explain the point here, that the intersection between the flap section and the end plate was obviously, you know, rather innovative compared to what other teams were using. The concept was deemed legal by the FIA for the 2022 season after some inspection, and then they changed their mind and changed the wording of this to ban this solution for 2023, and the same thing for Aston Martin's innovative rear wing that we shall see here. Now, Aston Martin are actually quite happy that even if this has been banned, like at least they've shown that they can actually innovate to make something interesting. I think we saw Christian Horner comment on this, that he expected to see many rear wings just like this arriving in Singapore. So this, I believe, came in Hungary, and effectively the former rear wings that we have seen in previous seasons, they've looked something like this, with the back of the rear wing and then the side of it is very, you know, straight and cut off with all these little inflection points to basically just generate as much downforce as possible. The issue with this is this creates an awful lot of turbulent air for the car behind, which means in the corners it becomes really difficult to follow, the dirty air effect effectively, and we've seen that diminish significantly this year. One of the reasons why was effectively the removal of this end plate on the rear wing. Now this is gone from the current rear wings, but Aston Martin brought it back and it looked like this, because in the rules it said something to the effect of no longer allowed like a straight piece at the end of the wing. So what they thought was, hang on, why don't we curve it and make a loop, and it effectively does the same thing by creating more downforce at the edge and keeping that airflow in to make sure it goes off the back of the wing, but it's, curved and circular in a way, so you can actually kind of get around the legal parameters here. So when people first saw this, especially on a high downforce circuit like Hungary, it was like, damn, this is a pretty unique idea that other teams, seemingly, I expected them to copy it, to be honest, especially for Singapore and other higher downforce tracks that were upcoming, but no one really ever did. And Aston Martin kind of got away with this till the end of the season. The FIA said, well, we're not sure, but whatever, go ahead and do it. And no other team really decided to copy it. And it probably was part of their kind of, progression, let's say, from Hungary to the end of the season, pretty much from halfway to the end. So that is now banned. I think Aston Martin probably expected it to be banned, but it's just a bit surprising that some of these things, are perfectly fine all season, then they're like, actually, no, that probably is causing more turbulent air to the car behind and is not in the spirit of the regulations, and therefore we're going to ban it. It happens every year, right? There's always regulation changes. I'm sure that Aston Martin saw this coming. I'm sure that Mercedes saw this coming to some degree, but they'll have to redesign their front wing concept. They'll also have to think about what this means for the rest of the car design, because they're raising the height of the leading floor this season. There's a couple of other small tweaks to the regulations to try and counter the porpoising effectively. And the teams are going to have to adjust to that as well, which is going to create some interesting aerodynamic consequences this season. And the cars are just so different this year anyway, and hopefully we see more of the same next year as well. Speaking of Mercedes, of course, we see every day at this point there's some new rumours and connections between Mick Schumacher and Mercedes. So yes, he has confirmed Toto Wolff that Mercedes is interested in signing Mick Schumacher as a reserve driver. Is there any better opportunity for Mick right now in the paddock in Formula 1? Probably not, almost certainly not. So the question is, does he want to stay in F1 or does he want to go elsewhere? And if he wants to stay in Formula 1 in some capacity, this seems like the obvious destination you would imagine. Quickly on Ferrari as well, we saw the rumours yesterday that Binotto has been sacked, and it's basically happening very soon indeed that he's going to get the bin. Now, as it turns out, the kind of rumours that were going around yesterday that it was going to be announced later in the day, that didn't come to fruition. Ferrari haven't put out another statement that says there is no foundation behind this, it's all speculation. So it's probably going to happen, but they haven't done it immediately, and obviously it's now a weekend, so they're not going to do it today or tomorrow, but potentially next week we're expecting some announcement around Binotto's future, and people are kind of wondering what's going to happen after Binotto leaves at Maranello for Ferrari, and whether this is actually a positive or a negative, which you guys have been having your thoughts on. Quick comment on this, I don't know if this has been decided yet, because another article I saw suggested that it had just been nominated, but the FIA is coming up with this action of the year, which I imagine is basically just moment of the season, right? And I believe they've nominated certain moments of the season, and maybe this one, or maybe this is just like one of the chief nominees, and like obviously the Hamilton double overtake at Silverstone. Probably to me the overtake of the year was Leclerc on Hamilton at a similar time in this race, around the outside of Copse, Leclerc on the older hard tyres, Hamilton on the fresher softs, and just, Leclerc sends it around the outside and gets the move done. Like, that was an unbelievable overtake, but this is probably most memorable moment of the season, maybe, so I can understand why it has been selected, if indeed it has. Quick comment on Red Bull as well, because Christian Horner, look at his smug face, man, he absolutely loves it, talking about how, obviously they're winning now, and everyone's trying to, cut them down in any which way, but as we've just seen, Red Bull, obviously they've had no, discussions really on anything that they've been doing being illegal compared to the regulations, outside, of course, of the whole 2021 cost cap drama, and I do wonder if in about August next year, there's going to be cost cap talk again. I'm sure there is, but we shall see, of course, if anything comes of it. And just to mention this, so 100 days only from today until lights go out in Bahrain, so 3 months and a bit until we get to see the new cars on track, and we'll do another video soon on what the W14 is going to look like, because there's been some rumours about that as well. So hit the like button if you enjoyed, subscribe if you're new, take care, and I'll see you next time.